The Jets have been shut out for the first time this season, falling 3-0 to the Kraken. A disappointing loss, but is it the end of the world? Probably not.
You're Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, and I'm a Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. So obviously, the Jets just fell to the Seattle Kraken 3-0. A bit of a tougher loss, and I think there are some takeaways that are worth chatting about. I mean, it's not going to be anything super surprising. You probably understand where Winnipeg is going to have some issues going forward. But I think the bigger question is, how do you work around some of these challenges, especially when it comes to 5v5 offense, creating more, and trying to give all of your lines the best chances of success that you possibly can. Winnipeg's still shorthanded. Everyone knows this. How do you manage that going forward? It's all about surviving these next few weeks. And while the Jets were able to get an early record to start that process, it's not going to be easy. And I think this game is a reminder of exactly why. We'll chat about what kind of went wrong in this game, how the Jets can prepare for tomorrow's game against the Flames, and also talk a little bit about the Jets needing to make a change on defense. It's probably overdue. You know me. I'm a broken record about this whole thing with Colin Miller. He really does need to come back into the lineup. Before we dive into all of that, though, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, tonight's game against the Kraken can probably be summarized as mostly just feeling slightly underwhelming. This wasn't a game where the Jets were outplayed like they've been in previous games. In fact, the Jets generally outchanced Seattle, and especially in the third period, Winnipeg was really piling on some great opportunities. They came really close to tying the game, and in fact, they only conceded one goal that was without the goalie pulled. So in a lot of ways, you could say the game itself was actually not bad. Where I think Winnipeg kind of had some issues, there were some decision-making challenges, a couple of missed opportunities. Velarde will probably see that goal on the goal line in his nightmares. Could have just tapped it home. Decord was totally lost and didn't have the puck anywhere near secured. Velarde was right there on the doorstep for the opportunity. This is usually where he makes his bread and butter. So to see him actually just straight up whiff on the puck, super rare. It's just not something that you're going to see very often. But it's hockey. It's a fast sport. Random crap like this happens sometimes. It is what it is. It's just one of those things you sort of have to suck up and move on, right? Not every night's going to be your night. And I think this is one of those evenings where, the Jets for the past couple of games have arguably lived beyond their means. So they were probably due for something to maybe not go 100% their way, especially with the kind of shooting percentage bender that they've been on. They've had some good puck luck. They've been finishing very clinically. At some point, you're going to have a game where maybe not everything goes in. And I think there were some moments in this game where, maybe there was a chance to build more pressure, but then somebody had a rough turnover, a counter sprang the other way, relieve the pressure, and Winnipeg didn't have enough time to get back into those individual moment-to-moment battles. So this game, I would characterize as feeling more just frustrating in some ways. I'm sure for the guys it felt really annoying to be so close and yet feel like you just couldn't quite hit pay dirt. Again, they got really close. There were a lot of opportunities, especially late in the game, but it ended up not really going their way. And when the goalie was pulled, and Helly came off, Winnipeg really didn't do a great job of managing the puck. I think that's one thing that probably did stand out in this game. Puck management and some of the turnovers. Unfortunately, they did play a bit of a role in this game. It's going to be an issue sometimes. In the past, Winnipeg hasn't gotten punished for it. Tonight, it felt like in the very few opportunities where the Kraken were like extremely dangerous. This was something that, unfortunately the Jets couldn't really contain. So, it is one of those things, right? Helly had been so brilliant for most of the night, but, he's not going to stop every single puck. And it's just, at some point you're going to have to fight through and find a way to score. But that was not what we saw in this game. Unfortunately, Winnipeg just felt like they were just missing a little bit of clinicism. And again, it's only your second loss of the season. You're 5-2. The main theme of these next few weeks until people get healthy is to just stay reasonably above 500. You do that, you stay in a good seeding position, especially as we get closer to American Thanksgiving. You're cooking, right? You don't have to stress too much about it. But I do think, this was probably one of the games that I was really hoping Winnipeg would take this weekend. Utah is going to be very tough. The Flames already showed on the road how annoying they are to play. So for Winnipeg, this might be a 2 points that kind of feels like a missed opportunity. But, the Kraken were playing pretty motivated to show off that they could win. You had the battle of the Lambert family, Lane Lambert versus his nephew, and, Lane's mother, and in this case, Brad's grandmother in the audience to watch. Felt like, a real good opportunity for the Jets to come away with a couple of points and have a really fun little narrative. Unfortunately, the Lambert party was a little bit spoiled. So tough outing, just one of those games where I feel like it slightly got away from the Jets and they didn't even play badly. But, sometimes weird stuff happens in small samples like this. And I think for the Jets, one of the things that they're going to want to do going forward is just find ways to create more even strength offense consistently. That's been, a little bit of a challenge to start these few games. I want to talk about maybe some adjustments the Jets can try internally. I think some of the ways that they have their current lineups arranged may not be suited in the exact way you'd want. Obviously this is the time for Arniel to do some experimentation, but also, amidst that, there may be a question about some chemistry, some play styles, and how some of these players and line combinations sort of gel together. Not everything has been peachy, squeaky clean, as you'd expect. It is the start of the season. You're dealing with a lot of injuries already, and this is going to be moments where you'll have rough patches. It just happens. But the important thing is to keep the longer trend in mind and focus on the bigger picture. You can worry about the details in some of the games individually, but right now for the Jets, I think it's just making sure that you can try and get to that point where the details matter. Keep the stuff in front of you that you can, keep the bigger picture in mind, and the rest will start to fall in place. But of course, for Winnipeg, one of the challenges recently, I think, for them has been creating consistent 5v5 offense. Been a little bit of a challenge. Partly, I think, the defense is an issue with this. Not super shocking, right? The blue line has kind of been a little bit of a pain point recently. We know that. We know that it's impacted Winnipeg's ability to move the puck up and down the ice. It is what it is. You're just going to have to deal with it. I want to talk about some individual line combinations, though, that might be worth trying if the Jets want to squeeze out a little bit more offense. We'll chat about specific ideas and who might be matched up with who in a better arrangement in just a brief moment. Let's be real, making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress, I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED, designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. If you're somebody who's a little nervous and you want something that's discreet, fast, and simple, Rugiet's here for you. They match you with a board-certified doctor, 100% online. There's no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments, and no embarrassment when you feel like things aren't going your way. And if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. It's fast, simple, and secure. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. Don't feel held back. Go with Rugiet. Visit rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNHL so they know we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're somebody who's a big stats nerd, maybe you know every QBR, maybe you know passer ratings, maybe you are familiar with rushing yards, or you might even be looking at the number of tackles or sacks in a game, this is your chance to use that inside knowledge to turn your football fandom and sports fandom in general, including hockey, into a big win, right? Just $5 if you're a new user, and if you win, you get $300 in bonus bets to keep the victories going. It's safe, secure, and easy, and it gives your Sunday sports watching a little bit of extra fun. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us at tonight's show as we're just chatting a little bit about Winnipeg. And obviously, this past game against the Kraken, it didn't go according to plan. I think the Jets will feel a little frustrated by what happened. Some of it was just luck, right? You know, you had the Velarde chance. He sort of whiffed. There were some individual turnovers and mistakes that, you know, maybe in other games, Winnipeg doesn't have happen. Maybe they punish the Kraken on some of these giveaways and stuff that Seattle had themselves. But it is what it is, right? I think there are some bigger trends. And, you know, one of the bigger things for Winnipeg, understandably so, is that 5v5 offense has been an issue. Winnipeg on paper is scoring a lot of goals, right? But if you actually look at how they've created their chances and what's kind of come out of these games, you'll notice that Winnipeg is usually getting outplayed at 5v5, which not really surprising. Your defense is down to really one strong pair that you can trust and two pairs that you probably have to handle with some gloves. Your offense up front is really the top line. Sometimes the middle six and bottom six are able to really elevate themselves, but it's been a little hit or miss, right? It depends on the line combinations. And I think for the Jets, while experimenting is fine, I think it might be time to change the approach a little bit. You know, I saw Lambert out there tonight on the third line trying to make some things happen, and it just didn't really seem like the right combination of skill sets. I think Brad is a guy who really succeeds alongside skill, and that's where I think, you know, you should put him with Taves. It's a combination that for some reason they really haven't gone with yet. They've tried a number of other combinations, Niederreiter, Taves, Pearson. They've tried some funky stuff. You had Iafallo at one point with Nyquist, Niederreiter with Nyquist and Taves. I mean, like, they try a lot of different things, but I feel like they're sometimes afraid to try some combinations that might actually give you a little bit more of a, I guess, balanced top six. One thing that I'd like to see just reunited is probably Niederreiter, Nyquist, and Nemesnikov. Like, that 3N line did a great job. Yeah, you'd maybe lose some of the experimentation factor, but I think in their case, right, you don't really need to know much more about what each of those guys is capable of. Where you really need to evaluate is players like Chibrikov or Lambert, right? If you are trying to figure out if they can be a more significant boost, put them in a more offensively inclined position, right? Taves, frankly, needs a higher skill line mate on the right side to make the most of his passing and stuff. Because, like, we know JT's not as fast as he used to be. You know, at his age, and certainly with his physical state right now, he's on the slower side, but he's still got great vision and hands. He needs somebody who can kind of feed off of that. You've already got Iafallo doing great forechecking and defensive work, and Alex really doesn't seem to mind kind of being a more transition-oriented, two-way impact forward, even if it perhaps comes at the expense of, like, higher-end offense. He does a lot of the dirty work. So in that respect, I feel like Iafallo's fine where he is. Play with Taves, right? Keep them together. But on that right wing, try like a Lambert, right? Brad is being used in a role that right now, I don't know if it necessarily suits his line trio. You know, the lines tonight, I didn't feel quite got the job done. I mean, they came close, but, you know, if you're going to play your young kids and your skill, maybe give them some higher end talent to work with. I think, Chibrikov, Lambert, guys like that, they really do feed off of being alongside somebody who's smart in the way that a Taves is. And maybe while they're playing together, they even pick up some good habits. So, not that you have to do this, but I feel like with the Jets kind of struggling to get 50% shot share most nights, you got to find a way to squeeze out some extra finishing ability, some extra creativity, something, right? You're probably going to lose your shot share battle more often than not in most of these games. Just going to be what it is, right? Until you get Lowry back, until you get Sandberg back, Perfetti back. Those guys are some of your most highest impact defensive or two-way players. So you're going to have to figure out how to compensate. And I think, again, it comes down to surviving, right? This is not a time where your experiments are likely to yield a lot of high-end results. The Jets don't quite have the ability to shoulder more than a couple of these injuries at a time. So for Winnipeg, this is one of those moments where you've tried a couple of combinations, maybe give one more a try where you elevate the kids back into a bigger role. I think unlike where you had Chibrikov with Taves, Lambert might be able to do a little bit more there. Brad's had a couple of really good scoring opportunities. I feel like he's come close to his first NHL goal. If you play it with Taves, you might find that it actually pans out. And Iafallo is good enough in the current spot to where I think he keeps up. I think he offers a safety valve and a bit of a defensive pump and gives both Taves and Lambert some room and coverage to work with. So that's a thought. I'm also going to talk a little bit about Miller needing to come in just because I feel like, right, like the offense obviously relies on the forwards, right? But your blue line and the puck mobility there is also a really important and sort of underappreciated aspect of this team, especially when like the defense struggles, as is right now, to get the puck up the ice. That has a really big impact on everything from your transition game to what happens in the offensive zone. You just need to play it smart and make sure that you give your forwards as much support as you can. You have limitations. You're going to be struggling with stuff. So don't make it harder on yourselves artificially. Arniel, I think, has done a solid job managing the injury crisis so far, but there are a couple of blind spots that he still has where I feel like, okay, I get why he wants to roll this lineup. I understand the thinking. And in some ways, it actually does make sense on paper, but, in practice, maybe it hasn't quite been nearly as effective and as impactful as I think he was hoping for. So, not that you want to like just throw things at a wall and see what happens, but think about some of the chemistry options, think about some of the alignment of skill sets, and go from there. You don't really have a lot of other options right now, and I think that is something that's important to acknowledge, especially for the Jets. Oftentimes in the past we've talked about Winnipeg not really making optimal lineup decisions. I don't know that there's a lot more that they can do right now that's optimal, right? Like what they've got so far is probably not far off from about as good as it gets, or even if you were to make things as optimal as possible, right? Like the most efficient, best lineup, it might still have relatively marginal impacts. Might not move the needle, but at least for now, figure out a way to emphasize some of your skill and speed. Give your offense a little bit more support. If the top line, like it did tonight, kind of falls a little short, you want somebody else to be able to pick up that slack. It's not going to happen often, but it will happen every so often where the top line maybe ghosts a game, just struggles to get things happening, or gets matched up and matched out of the game. It's going to be a thing. They're going to face some great teams out there, one of whom we'll see on Sunday in this Utah squad. Scary team, man. They have the matchup guns. They have the firepower and speed to make Winnipeg's life a living heck. So, give yourself as much of a chance against a team like this as you possibly can. But curious to know what you felt about the overall offensive approach recently. Are you happy about what the Jets are doing? I sometimes feel like they certainly get into the offensive zone, but it's been harder for them to attack the slot and create those really good chances. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, you're in a state where things are not the way you'd like them to be, but you're going to have to do as much as you can to survive. one of the ways that they could make themselves more livable is just having Miller back in the lineup. And I feel like this isn't really rocket science, but it seems to be a bit of a sticking point with Winnipeg. We'll chat about why this could give the Jets at least a little bit more support in a brief moment. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your favorite team. That's where Gametime comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. If you're somebody who's looking for maybe some upcoming outdoor games, Gametime is fantastic. It gets prices lower, closer to puck drop, and maybe if you're looking for some Jets tickets, this is your way to save money. I've used Gametime buying Ravens playoff tickets. Couldn't have been easier. I got a great price, and I got panoramic seat views, so I knew what I was paying for up front. No hidden fees, no surprise charges. Everything as transparent as possible. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Hey friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we're just wrapping up real quick with some final thoughts on a change the Jets really just have to make at some point. You got to get Colin Miller back into the lineup. Listen, I know that, the coaching staff doesn't feel he's trustworthy, and, he'll make bigger mistakes, at least visually, than maybe some of the other guys. But like Schenn is underwater right now. Fleury also kind of underwater. Stanley and Pionk kind of underwater. The defense just needs help. Like they are swimming, and not in a good way. I'll say it. They're just drowning, right? The blue line, especially on rush offense, has really had a tough time. The counters against, the rush opportunities against, they continue to pile up, and it also really hurts the Jets when Winnipeg wants to get offense up the other way. They don't have guys in the back end who have Morrissey's creativity. I'm not going to sit here and say that Miller is going to do that, but the one thing that Miller does do pretty efficiently is get the puck to the net. I know Stanley's doing his absolute best to try and be, the next Cale Makar, and he's had some pretty good shifts where he's gotten really good scoring opportunities. He had one against the Kraken tonight that I thought was actually going to pay off and get him his third goal of the season. Eat your heart out, McDavid. But they just have to find somebody who can do it consistently, and Miller's probably your best shot at it. I'm not going to sit here and say that Colin is more than like a number 5 or number 6D, but right now Winnipeg has like 3 7th defenders on the team in the active lineup. That's probably not sustainable. And for the Jets forwards who frankly need more support from the back end, asking Fleury, Schenn, and Stanley to try and carry that load is probably a little more than any of them can handle. Some of them have really tried to step up and do it. I appreciate it, but I think it's a lot for those guys. They're not necessarily dynamic, offensively minded guys. Miller's probably the closest to get, and he'll have his own idiosyncrasies. He slaps the puck into traffic a few too many times in a way that's maybe not the most efficient. He'll make some kind of really silly penalties and mistakes. You're just going to have to live with something, right? You're kind of picking your poison right now, and I think for the Jets, the poison that they've chosen is kind of making life a little harder on themselves. I'm not going to say that Miller's going to fix everything, but he might help you out offensively at least, right? Try and squeeze out as much value as you can. You're in a tough spot right now. You're missing 3 of your highest impact players outside of your superstars. You might need to figure out something else that's maybe a little bit more of a trying to get that extra little bit of juice out of the lemon, right? You're trying to squeeze as much as you can. Miller coming back in might help you a little bit. Now, the Jets are going to have to turn things around real quick, probably have Comrie in net, and you're going to be facing an angry Flames team. Calgary just really isn't winning much. The Jets have already beat them this week in really frustrating fashion for the Flames. They're going to be pissed off. They've got, not too much different likely coming into this lineup from the other night. You likely have Huberdeau, Kadri, and Farabee on your first line, Coleman, Backlund, and Coronado on your second, Honchak, Frost, and Zary on your third, and then Lomberg, Kirkland, and Klapka on your fourth. Now, I say they're probably not going to change a lot, but that was a pretty different lineup than it originally was. If we're comparing before the first game against Calgary, the Flames seemingly tried to flip a lot of different things, trying to squeeze offense out where they can. It's been tough. Goal scoring has come at a real premium. And if you look at where the Jets are, the Flames offense isn't really much better, right? Calgary struggles to do much of anything efficiently other than skate fast and throw pucks at the net. That's about the best that they can manage right now. So for the Jets, after a tough loss against Seattle, this is your chance to rebound. The guys are going to be tired. The Flames are going to be pissed. This is a good chance for the Jets to show that they have a lot of perseverance and they are willing to fight for every inch. They got close in the game against the Kraken to tying it and coming back. Time to take out some of your frustrations against the Flames. You had a closer game in the last one. Calgary arguably outplayed the Jets in that one. This time, it's time to flex a little bit. Show Calgary why they probably need a bit of a McKenna boost more than the Jets do. The Flames roster, just being entirely honest, not so good. On defense, they'll have Ball and Anderson as your first pairing, then Bean and Uyghur on your second, and Hanley and Parekh on your third. Yeah, like I said previously in the last game the Jets played against Calgary, I thought the matchup advantage should go in Winnipeg's favor. Hasn't quite played out that way in the first game. Hopefully it does in the second. I'm going to say 3-2 Jets. Give me your score predictions in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day. Every day we'll have coverage of Winnipeg versus Calgary tomorrow night. So see you then. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.